for Nigel.
Thank you very much. You cannot be for or against any subject unless you know something about that topic. I have had the privilege to have travelled to nearly every single Muslim country in the world. I call it a privilege because knowledge is power. This afternoon I'm going to talk to you about the Quran. Islam, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. I'm going to ask you to imagine that you're at a car sales distribution centre and you wish to buy a car. You'll know that the second-hand car market, there's something called buyer beware. In other words, when you buy that car, once you've got it off the forecourt, actually you are responsible. I say that because taqiyya is a word you need to know, you need to have some knowledge of. And taqiyya is where Muslims are allowed to deceive non-Muslims, in other words infidels, if it does actually help and promote Islam. The Bible is descriptive. The Quran is prescriptive. In other words, it is a direct command. I repeat, a direct command. You must do what is in here. There's been a lot of brainwashing in respect of Islam. Remember that when a child is born into a Muslim community, a Muslim family, you start to learn about this at a very, very early age. You can all remember seeing those photographs of ladies in burqas outside the Houses of Parliament, and they've got signs saying, freedom, go to hell, Islam honours women. That's interesting because under Sharia law, a woman's word is worth 50% of that in comparison to a man. So I'm confused why a lady in a burqa has a big sign saying Islam honours women. We have a population Ponzi scheme going throughout the world. About 2 years ago we celebrated the fact that we had 7 billion people on this planet, and already many of those are going hungry, many of those are starving, many of those people don't have access to fresh water, and I understand fully why they want to leave that environment and go to another environment like France, like Europe, and of course the United Kingdom. I am not going to blame those people. If I was in that situation, I would do exactly the same. I would do it because I love my family and I care about them. Even if I was a single person, I would still try and better myself. And I have sympathy and utmost empathy for those people. However, we also have a responsibility to help those people who are in the United Kingdom. We can't make way for everybody. Already we are building on greenbelt land. Already we're building on farmland. Farmland that actually we're going to need for food.
That's right.
And to make things worse, as we've recently seen about 3 years ago, we are building on floodplains. And when those floodplains flood, actually they flood and people can't get insurance for their homes. So it's now is the time for all of us to go out and remind people that Britain is full. There is no more room. I've got a question for the audience. How many times do you need to double one of these, it's a pound coin, until it is worth 1 million? And the progression is 1 times 2 is 2, 2 times 2 is 4, 2 times 4 is 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, 512, up in that progression. So let's have some guesses from the audience. How many times does it take to double a pound before it's worth $1 million? What do you think it is?
100.
100? Okay.
24.
24?
88.
88?
Well,
Actually, Cliff, it's 20. But you're very, very near it. And I say this because of the population Ponzi scheme that we actually have. All of these people are multiplying, and understandably why not, but we're getting bigger and bigger and bigger in this country, as well as having more and more people coming in. And it really is unsustainable. I remember as a child, on the way to Sunday school, I can remember walking through some woods, going across a canal, and I remember seeing some squirrels, just going about their business, jumping from tree to tree. And on the way back, I can remember watching them. They had absolute freedom. But it's interesting because I'm talking about red squirrels. They were actually indigenous to the United Kingdom. This is not me trying to say black, white, or any other colour. I'm just talking about the indigenous squirrels. But eventually the grey ones came in. And what actually happened was all of the red squirrels are gone. You can actually go to a zoo and see them. And there's one small area in Northumberland where you can see them. But what I can promise you is you won't see any red squirrels. They were all forced out of the area, and actually, in their instance, they were killed. What I would like to ask is how many people have actually read this book, the Quran, from start to finish? I have. I've read it twice. There's a gentleman there. Anyone else who have read it from start to finish? How many people in this room, and I can still put my hand in the air, have read 5 or more pages? That's encouraging. You see, what I would like is to be able to ask that question on television to everyone in the United Kingdom, because there's something very important here. It's called knowledge, and knowledge is power. I'm going to give you a very short history about Islam. It started about 1400 years ago in a place called Saudi Arabia. If you've ever been to a place called Jeddah, about 70 kilometers from Jeddah, there is a place called Mecca. And in the hills surrounding Mecca, that is a place where the Prophet Muhammad was given the contents of this book, the Quran, from Allah. It's interesting because, as was common in those days, the Prophet Muhammad was illiterate. And according to clerics, he had sex with a child who was aged 9.
Yep.
It's interesting that some people using Taqiyya are saying, well, actually it was 10, oh no, it was 11. Well, actually it could have been 12 or 13, but no one that I've actually spoken to, particularly Muslim clerics, have gone over the age, really, of 13. Most would agree it's actually 9. So let's be clear, the Prophet Muhammad, under British law, was actually illiterate and a paedophile. I would like to say, I wasn't there, I'm not here to defend him, I can only tell you what Muslim clerics have actually said to me personally. Has anyone ever seen a card trick before? I'm sure you all have. A card trick? You know how it's done. You know that someone is using their hands in a skillful way, a skillful manner to entertain people. But what is interesting is that this is a very, very clever trick. And you know what's so clever about it? 99% of the people in the UK who are not Muslims haven't read it. And let's be clear, you can't have several versions of the Quran. There is only one version, there is only one word of Allah. There are no other versions. Yes, it was probably written in Arabic first, and it's been translated in languages throughout the world by Muslim clerics who are very, very skilled in their knowledge of this particular book, but there is only one word of Allah. There are no other translations to different ideas and different views. Now, when I first read this book, I read 10 pages, and if I'm honest, I was getting a little bit bored. But there's something interesting that I noticed, that on every third or fourth page there was something very clear, and because I believe in democracy, something very sinister. Because on every third stroke fourth page, it clearly states here a hatred of unbelievers, and unbelievers must, I repeat, must have a painful chastisement.
Yeah. Infidels.
Yeah.
That causes me alarm, that causes me upset, and that causes me concern. We've all seen marches where Muslims have actually had signs such as "Freedom, go to hell," and that is outside the Houses of Parliament where our true democracy takes place. Doesn't mean we like what they do, doesn't mean we approve of what they do, but every 4 years or so we have something called a vote, and we can kick them out, and it's a majority decision, just like Brexit. It's a majority decision. Now, there are various ways of actually attacking our society. Some we forget about. One of them is called chemical jihad, and I'm not talking about chemical weapons. It's actually happening now. It might have happened to that body, of the body washed up this morning, just down the road. What actually happens is, in places such as Afghanistan, which is a great place to grow poppies, they grow a lot of poppies, that's converted to heroin. They sell the heroin, and in turn, that buys guns to actually fund terrorism, not just here, but throughout the world. And because those people become dependent on those chemicals, such as heroin or crack cocaine, they need more of it, and they want more of it. And I have a friend who was addicted to heroin, and it absolutely ruined her, and it destroyed her life. I can still remember her shaking and vomiting because she didn't have any. And that's how desperate these people get. It is really shocking, but they have to have it. Otherwise, they can't function. It's just not possible. Now, another way of attacking our society is whereby Islamic terrorist cells use British charity money and dole payments to supply the bad people, the Muslim terrorists who want to destroy us and destroy our society. One clever way is to have as many children as possible, because then the dole payments actually increase. And I want to be clear, I don't believe all Muslims donate their dole money to such causes, but there are some, and it causes me concern, and I'm very worried about it. There's a mosque very near to me. It's the Shah Jahan Mosque in Woking. It's the first mosque in the United Kingdom, and it was founded around 1889, so that was a long time ago. And what I would like to do is to tell you a story, very briefly, about a headmistress called Erica Connor, and she was actually headmistress of the New Monument School in Woking. 80% of her pupils were Muslim. Many were with parents who were completely illiterate in English, and half were on the special needs register. Under Mrs. Connor, the headmistress, the school showed the second most improved SATs results in the whole of the country. And she was invited to Downing Street in around 2001. And of course, understandably, the children at Monument School, New Monument School, celebrated in the IT room, and it was announced in all the newspapers that the school was one of Britain's most improved. However, there were sinister occurrences taking place at that particular school. There was a Muslim convert, his name was Paul Martin, and he was the governor at the New Monument School. And if there is one overriding lesson, it is that officialdom, anxious to maintain political correctness, will often kowtow to radical Islam, even if it does not reflect the wishes of the wider Muslim community. The headmistress was harangued on the need for a closer relationship between Islam and the school. In the High Court, Surrey County Council was ordered to pay headmistress Erica Connor more than £400,000 compensation for failing to support her. New Monument was once a beacon for community cohesion and educational excellence. That had been sacrificed on the altar of religious bigotry. Yeah. I'm sure that all of you have heard of our ex-chairman, Nick Griffin, who was an MEP, and all those years ago, and I can still remember it well, he was talking about Muslim paedophiles grooming vulnerable children. So, what did the powers to be do? They wanted to shut him up, silence him, and put him in prison. So they put him on trial. And as a result of that trial, thankfully, a jury actually found that he was not guilty. So, the CPS were unhappy with that. So on a second occasion, they had another attempt, and he went to court. Judge and jury again found not guilty. Recently, the unprecedented huge numbers of children that are non-Muslim, the most vulnerable in our society, they've been addicted to alcohol and drugs caused by the Muslim paedophiles, and then they've been passed around their friends. And let's be clear about something. This is not down to race or colour. As long as it's not Muslim children being attacked, raped, and used as underage girls to be passed around their friends, it can be Sikh children, it can be Buddhist children, it can be Hindu children, it can be Christian children, it can be Catholic children. Actually, it doesn't matter. But the key point is, it mustn't be Muslim children. This has been happening not in just one place, it's been happening in towns throughout the whole of the United Kingdom. And it's a big problem, and one we all need to talk about. It's important to remind everyone that not all Muslims are paedophiles. Of course they're not. There's a lot of non-Muslims who choose to be paedophiles. But if we are going to understand, in this instance, why Muslim paedophiles carry out their particular devastation on a community, on the vulnerable children, we actually have to talk about it, no matter how difficult it is. What we need is an open, honest, clear debate, and that way it's a debate worth having. I want to talk to you a little bit about blasphemy. Let's be clear, if you commit the offence of blasphemy, in other words, speaking out against Islam in Pakistan, you will actually receive the death penalty. Be clear on that. So if you choose to go on holiday to Pakistan, I would strongly recommend you don't do that. Examples of blasphemy, and I could probably come up with 1,000, but I'll just list a few for you. Speaking ill of Allah, finding fault with Muhammad, drawing pictures to represent Muhammad, naming a teddy bear called Muhammad, finding fault with Islam, expressing an atheist or a secular point of view, or distributing material. I can't help noticing that someone is drinking alcohol in the audience, and can I say that is also forbidden as well. The list will go on and on and on. It's quite interesting because if you ever take a Bible to Saudi Arabia, actually, if you're really lucky, it'll just be taken off you. But you could find yourself in serious, serious trouble. If you try starting Hinduism or Sikhism or Buddhism in Saudi Arabia, you will be arrested and you will go to prison. There's no question of that, because the point is, in the home of Islam, Saudi Arabia, it's important that they don't confuse people. If you've only got one religion and you start introducing all these other religions, it will confuse people. And that's why they don't want it to happen. The penalties for blasphemy, well, I've talked about the death penalty. There's also the removal of limbs, arms and legs. I'm going to just read you one verse from the Quran. I'm not going to read you any more because I hope that I can inspire you to go out and get your own point of view. And it says in Surah 5, the punishment of those who wage war against Allah and His Messenger and strive with might and main for mischief through the land is execution or crucifixion or the cutting off of hands and feet from opposite sides or exile from the land. That is their disgrace in this world, and a heavy punishment is theirs in the hereafter, except for those who return, repenting before you apprehend them. And know, this is the bit I like, and know that Allah is forgiving and merciful. What I would suggest, if you're ever in a situation whereby you're kidnapped by Muslim terrorists, I'm going to give you a get out of jail card to save your life. Yep. Just say you're going to convert and you really want to learn all about it. You can change your mind later, but just to be clear, that if someone converts from Christianity to Islam, that's great, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you try converting from Islam back to Christianity, you're in very big trouble. And in some countries, they will kill you. It's just not allowed. What I would say to you is, what religion is so weak in content that it cannot take criticism of any kind? We need to formulate a plan on how we deal with Islamic extremists. If a Muslim has a gun and a police officer has a gun, we know what's going to happen there. But I'm a great believer of Gandhi's method. I don't know if many of you can remember, back to the history of India, it was at one time called Hindustan, and Gandhi actually knew that having all those Muslims in one place was not going to work. It was causing too many problems. So eventually in the partition, I think it was around 1947, Pakistan was formed, which was predominantly Islamic. But in India, it's Hinduism, Sikhism, some Christians as well, and a small number of Muslims as well. But they split up mainly because of the Islamic faith. But what I like about Gandhi is the way he did things. He was a man of peace. And even though his followers, and in his case himself, were beaten, violence was never an option. Violence, he knew, would not work. Even when some of his followers were shot dead, he was a great believer in spreading the message of peace. We must always remember history because we can learn so many interesting facts from it. And what I would say to you is, yes, it's a long-term view, but you must remember that Gandhi won in the end, and he won through peaceful means. The other important weapon in our toolbox is bird's eye peace. I expect everyone here is thinking, bird's eye peas, what's that got to do with Islamic terrorism? Well, I'll tell you, many years ago, when Patsy Kensit, an actress, was very young, she actually was on the bird's eye pea advert. And in sales, they actually call it the repeat method, where you repeat, you repeat, you repeat. And I remember seeing this advert of bird's eye peas, and I can still roughly remember how it goes. Bird's eye peas are fresh, bird's eye peas are healthy, they're absolutely wonderful. At the end, Patsy Kensit goes, and the reason why you remember that is because marketing used something called the repeat method. The repeat method. Someone else also used that to incredible effect. Someone I can't stand, someone I despise from the bottom of my heart. There was a chap called Jerry Adams, and I know you all know that name. Now, I can still remember seeing Jerry Adams on television in an interview. And the interviewer would ask him about violence. He says, all I want is peace, peace, peace. All I want is peace, peace, peace. And then the interviewer would say, well, how about all the violence that happened here? All I want is peace, peace, peace. All I want is peace, peace, peace. And the interviewer could have actually said, what's the price of beer? And he says, all I want is peace, peace, peace. All I want is peace, peace, peace. But he was using the repeat method. And I can still remember what he said. It's still in my head because of the repeat method. And sometimes I would say to you that less is more. I went down to Rick Stein's restaurant and I paid an absolute fortune for a meal. I just wanted to do it as once in a lifetime opportunity. And I got this plate of food and there's hardly anything on it. And that was his version of less is more. But what I'm trying to say is sometimes when we get into a discussion, if we just repeated something simple to people, actually they're more likely to remember it. That's why I would actually say to you, if ever you get stuck, once you've read the Quran, just remember a hatred of unbelievers, and that unbelievers must have a painful chastisement. It's repeated throughout there on a regular basis. And of course, the third option is, it's important that we encourage as many people to join the British National Party, because we are the people who speak out against it. We are the people who remind people what is actually in here. During World War II, there was a very interesting person called Pastor Martin Niemöller. You've probably never heard of him, but he wrote some really interesting, important words, and I'd like to read those words to you. He said, first they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out, because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out, because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out, because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. The Muslim religion is the fastest growing religion in the UK and the world. I've often wondered what the British National Party have achieved, so I can only speak from my own personal words, my own personal experience. I joined the British National Party all those years ago for two reasons. Firstly, I wanted us to be able to talk about Islam. I wanted us to be able to debate Islam. I wanted to openly have freedom of speech. We do, to a certain extent, have freedom of speech in this country, but it's with a very, very big question mark. We're actually in a position now where people are talking about it. We are talking about it because terrorism is part of our lives now. The other reason I wanted to join the British National Party and take an interest in politics is because I wanted to be out of the European Union. Yes, it's taken decades to do it. Good things take time, and we're not there yet, let's be clear. But we're getting there. And thanks to the British National Party, and thanks to other people who hold our views who are not members, although I would hope we would welcome them, we are making progress, albeit slow. And what I would say to you is this: that the future is bright. The future is red, white and blue. The future is the British National Party.